where are we today in the Senate with regards to PIB? As I speak, distinguished delegates, we have gone through the second reading, which is a general debate on the principles of the actual bill. We've gone through that. We've gone through public hearings. And where we are today is we have gone into what we call the technical session. As you are aware, this Petroleum Industry Bill document is a consolidation of 16 pieces of legislations that were very independent or on their own. But we have brought them, some of them have been subsumed into areas for greater efficiency. We are into what we call the technical session in the Senate. By that, I mean the 3 original committees, that's the upstream oil, downstream oil, and gas. And of course, as a joint committee, we always include the judiciary committees in our bill formation or establishment. We have gone back to our different committees now for technical session to give the bill the in-depth identification of what it contains. For instance, in the gas committee, we have taken out the sections that dealt and still deals with the gas. We want to find out what the contents are, whether they are good enough, whether we should, and as we know we are doing, comparing what the government has proposed to what we describe as best practices. We intend and we have identified professionals in this area that will look at the section that deals on gas production and exploitation, gas, the midstream gas, which is the production, and the downstream, which is production and processing, and then the downstream gas, which is distribution of gas. What is PIB talking about issue of gas development? More especially, what is it proposing for new entrants? What is the transparency level as to investment, as to attract investment into the gas sector? Are people going to be comfortable to come into Nigeria or to choose Nigeria as an investment place for gas purposes? I'm talking about gas. And my colleagues in upstream, they are doing the same thing. Before now, or the idea, I believe, for this new legislation is to open the oil and gas industry wider, make doing business in Nigeria in the oil and gas industry clearer and to the benefit of intended investors, and of course improve Nigeria's revenue profile when we have this bill passed. That people can choose to come into Nigeria to either go into gas sector or remain into oil exploration, distribution, and further processing. How would an investor choose Nigeria in preference to other countries in Africa that also have this product? So where we are, I believe that between this month, it's just unfortunate that sometimes we get misquoted, we don't get the required or the expected commendation where we have done well in the National Assembly. Yes, because some people would say, I've seen fellow Nigerians say, this National Assembly should be scrapped, or these National Assembly people should go on part-time, or they are doing that or doing this. I don't begrudge anybody from saying anything, because we are in a democracy, and especially when things are not properly cleared to non-legislators, it can be misinterpreted. So what, for instance, I should have been here since yesterday, but we are battling to go through the budget for 2014, which as of now has not been passed. And that is still the job of the National Assembly legislators. We are also working on some of the burning issues in our today's Nigeria's discourse, which we have to come out with satisfactory answers to so many issues, which I'm not going to talk about.
Okay.
So, in a nutshell, the spirit is there, the commitment is there by the legislators, and we are committed to ensuring that PIB will become a law, will become an act from us in this 7th Senate.
In the House of Representatives, the committee that we have for it is Right Honorable Bauer, the deputy, the whip of the House of Representatives. I am also a member of that committee as chairman, Petroleum. And so I can speak on what actually is the position. Nigerians are aware that we had public sessions, public hearing sessions, particularly in all the 6 zones of the Federation. And we have also had the final one in Abuja. We, as at now, are at the technical stage. We have constituted a committee within the committee itself, a smaller committee, which is trying to dot the I's and cross the T's to look into the technical details of this bill. Of course, with the view to ensuring that we come out with a bill that Nigerians will be proud of, a bill that will develop the oil and gas industry, and a bill that will ensure that investments in the oil and gas continue to be on the increase. The Parliament is not unaware that as we speak, there are so many countries within Africa that now have oil. And as a result, I want to assure you that we will ensure that the fees, the bills, and some other things relating to the physical features will be done in such a way as to ensure that we remain in very good state and very good competition with other countries of the world, and particularly other countries in Africa. Because we don't want a situation when we will get a bill, pass into law that will drive investors out of Nigeria completely. At the same time, we will strike a balance and ensure that there is value for our money and that we gain a lot from the passage of this bill. In a nutshell, it is my pleasure to say that by the special grace of God Almighty, all other things being equal, as my colleagues will say, they say ceteris paribus, we are most likely to pass this bill this particular session. Parliament is constituted of very patriotic Nigerians. We know that as at now, investment is at a standstill because of this bill that has not been passed. And so we are determined, more than ever before, to ensure that we pass this bill and let Nigeria move forward.
There is nothing at all that I see that is wrong with the PIB. But I'm also aware that it's been in the House of Assembly since 2008, going back and forth. And this is 2014. That's 7 years ago, I guess. And this is the 7th Assembly. And I know that there are other bills or challenges that you got to face, or you're facing at the moment. And I'm also aware that the 7th Assembly will wind down in May 2015. If it is not passed before then, what becomes of the bill? Are we going to take it back and back and back? Why I'm saying this is that the fact that we all know that the objectives are good, okay? Once investment in the oil and gas is delayed, when I say delayed, because obviously investors will want to know what is in it for me before I put in money. We're talking about millions of dollars. And once you have that doubt, you like hold back. I want to be sure before you put in money in anything. We all knew what happened last Saturday when the immigration services, it shows the level of unemployment in the country. And I must tell you that I'm actually down the line. You know, I eat from the crumbs that falls from the table of the IOC. Just, you know, just a fabrication yard. But I know that in the Niger Delta, it plays an important role in employment. You're talking about the welders, the fitters, the erectors, the engineers. And once these projects don't come into the yard, it's a problem. You cannot even keep the yard shut for 2-3 months because of overheads. I'm not saying it's a thing that we should just pass already, but I think from 2008 to 2014 is rather a very long time for me to probably to nail and probably cross the T's and dot the I's. Honestly. I know that I was discussing that is in electrical engineering you have the cause and effect. Okay, you input in and you want to know what your output should be. So obviously you will have done a lot of simulation to be sure that the effect of the passage, what will it amount to? Because we can actually see it, and there was PIB last year in this forum, because I spoke in one of the sessions that had to do with oil and gas community. So if you're not careful, we're going to be talking PIB again next year. Meanwhile, on a serious note, I had a structure loaded out for Total last year, December. And if I cannot match what I have in terms of project, in terms of manpower, obviously the next thing is to tell some of the guys to go home, which most fabricators will look at what is coming, like I told you. So you're sending people home instead of having more things to do. So I would rather want to look at it from this perspective. Now, whatever is holding it, okay? Because you cannot doubt what the keynote address. You can't doubt it, okay? It's gold for us. In fact, I thought I could go into something else because I saw a lot of. He talked about some of the acreages not taking off at the moment. Probably I can, as a Nigerian, try to take some of them. But honestly, employment down the line, people in the industry, fabricators like us, we want more projects coming to the yard. And if the PIB will do that, fine. But for 7 years, I think we should quickly do that because most of the yards are running out of patience.
I'm very glad to hear the basic objectives of the PIB, which is to do with the open and transparent reforms, which is very good, and in terms of creating the right fiscal rules. And most importantly, what you said here is to create a competitive environment in Nigeria, because right now it's very easy for the capital to fly. I think that's the easiest way. So when you said that we need to have a competitive reforms in Nigeria, which is very, very encouraging. End of the day, when this PIB comes out and if it can ensure that Nigeria remains competitive, it will be good for Nigeria as a country and good for all other stakeholders, whether it's the oil company and the service companies. Now, from our perspective, we are a service company. Probably we come a little bit down the value chain. It is the IOCs and the independent indigenous companies who will be in the upfront when it comes to investment. But for us, it's very important that that investment is there so that we follow it up with what we can offer. From a service company perspective, and especially companies like Halliburton, I think where we really add value is technology. And probably technology is one which I thought was probably the least talked about over the last 2 days. And I think that's where a company like Halliburton adds a lot of value. And having the right reforms are very, very important. And I can quote and share some of our experiences other places in the world where Halliburton thought that yes, this is an easy country to work in and there are good resources available. So we went and put in our manufacturing facilities. We put in our manufacturing facilities in Malaysia, in China. You know, we sourced equipment from India. We have our technology centers in Saudi Arabia, Brazil, and India, and other places. So I would like to see that, you know, with more and more investments coming into a country like Nigeria, whose production is probably more than some of the Middle East countries, we would like to see some of these investments coming into Nigeria, where a company like us would be, pleased to come and invest and put a technology center here or a manufacturing center here, which will drive all other aspects what we are looking from a PIB in terms of human capital development. We in Halliburton employ around 1,000 people in Nigeria, so that will increase. And more than that, you know, once we have technology center, we have more and more Nigerians employed and working. Plus, as a company, we would be glad to cooperate and collaborate with the National Content Board and law to make sure we partner and provide the value proposition which company like us provide, which is technology. So we want to partner with local companies and provide the technology edge so that we can explore and exploit the oil fields in a better and more efficient way. And in the morning we heard about cost efficiency. I think a lot of cost efficiency can come with the right technology approach.
Let me start by saying, first of all, industry supports reform, clearly supports reform. The need is clear. For those of you that were in the session earlier this morning where we were talking about what the forward look for the industry was and talking about all the challenges we had, the security, the funding, the bureaucratic inefficiency, we need reform. And quite frankly, it's those things that are slowing down the investment. It's not necessarily uncertainty associated with PIB. We're continuing on with our business plans, but we can't seem to execute because of all the issues that are in the industry today. And they're not new, but they're certainly prevalent today. And it's those issues that we need to address, and we need to address with a good piece of legislation. Now, to your specific question, why do we see it different? Why would Nigeria lose this significant investment? And let me give you a little context for that statement. First of all, the oil producers trade section, it's about 26, 27 companies, large indigenous companies, large international companies. Represents probably about 95% of Nigeria's production today in terms of what we currently produce. And so we've taken a look at adding all the business plans together and say, okay, what would the case be as it exists today in terms of the investments and the production that would come from those investments going forward? And what we've done with that is to apply the terms that are currently put together in the PIB, and it's the combination of the royalties, the taxes, and the incentives to say, okay, what is the difference? And what we see is there are projects that are no longer economically viable. They don't make the threshold of something that a shareholder would invest in, even an NPC would invest in, with the terms as proposed. And so there's the internal look at just the absolute viability of a project on a standalone basis, and that's one factor that comes into play. It doesn't work. We estimate conservatively about a third of the oil projects, the JV projects that we would have in our portfolio wouldn't go. No deep water projects would go. Nothing would make the thresholds. And about 90% of the gas projects would be canceled. There would be no incentive to go forward with these. And I'm going to see Victor jotting down notes, and I know he's going to take issue with me. He always does. But that's okay. That's what this debate and dialogue is about. That's a good thing. But the point is, we see it very, very differently. And I'm very encouraged to hear that the National Assembly, both the House and the Senate, are involving experts to try to help understand the very careful interplay between royalties, taxes, and incentives to get these right. Because what we see today, what's been tabled, doesn't feel right. It doesn't work on a standalone basis. Now, the other piece that's been brought up, and again, I was very encouraged to hear the comments about the perspective on global competitiveness, and particularly Africa competitiveness. When you take a look at what's going on around the world, there are probably more opportunities today than there have been in decades for the oil and gas industry for investments. Why? New areas are opening up. They're putting in very attractive fiscal terms to attract the investments. There being some very exciting discoveries up and down the west coast of Africa, east coast of Africa. There's a significant technology application in North America that's completely changed the supply-demand balance in the world factors. So it's a different place today, and there's more competition for investments for the international investors, certainly, and many of the large indigenous investors than ever before. And what we see right now with what's been tabled on the PIB, Nigeria would be less competitive for those investments than they are today. And so I'm very encouraged to hear that this is being carefully looked at, because for Nigeria to continue to attract investment, it has to recognize it can't work in a vacuum. It's got to consider the outside opportunities relative to what they're offering the investors. So it's very, very important that that balance is looked at as well. Now, last year, Dr. Parra gave a very important question to the panel. It's what would good look like? Because what we need is a good PIB. What we need is a bill that actually provides the reforms and addresses the issues that the PIB was originally conceived to try to address. We clearly need to reform, but what does good look like? Well, I've covered some of the points already, but let me reiterate. Globally competitive fiscal terms. Nigeria has to be competitive. As has been pointed out many times in the last day or two, capital will move very efficiently and very quickly to where the opportunities are. Nigeria must be competitive. Secondly, an enabling investment climate. What does that mean? Well, in addition to does it make sense economically, do you have the things needed that give you confidence to invest as an investor? One of the most important is what we call contract sanctity. In other words, the investments that you make are going to be honored based on the terms that you made them under. They're not going to be changed retroactively. Can you imagine if you're buying a house and all of a sudden the bank decides to change the terms of your loan when you're halfway through the payment? You wouldn't stand that. You wouldn't take that. You would no longer do business with that bank. Well, Nigeria has a decades-long reputation for honoring the agreements. If things are changed retroactively in the investments that industry has made billions of dollars are not honored on the terms in which those investments were made, think what that does to investor confidence going forward in the future. Would you invest your money in something knowing that it could easily change? Another very important piece, what does good look like, is a very clear, transparent, efficient regulatory environment. And clearly some of the changes that are being proposed are good. Having a commercialized NOC, National Oil Company, strip away some of the regulatory functions, clarity on what's a regulator and what's a commercial entity, that will definitely help. But when you look at the complexity that's going into place, additional agencies, clearly the government can organize itself any way they want. Regulators can be put in place any way that they so desire. But take a look at the complexity. Because again, what we're looking for is bureaucratic efficiency. What we're concerned about when we see the proliferation of additional agencies, it's going to be difficult to see that efficiency being generated. So something that's critically important for what a good PIB would bring that bureaucratic efficiency and regulatory clarity. Last but not least, a commercial national oil company, an entity that is focused on delivering business results against a shareholder expectation, and most importantly, has the opportunity to go to the capital markets to raise funds for its investment program, just like other companies do. That is probably one of the single biggest challenges that the industry face. We understand the calls on the revenues generated by the industry for the national coffers, but if the national oil company as developed under the PIB is not allowed, is not structured in a way that makes it possible to go after the commercial markets, the bill will not have accomplished one of its major objectives, and that is to address the perennial funding issues that have plagued the industry for decades. What we see today, it's very questionable whether or not the restructuring will provide that access to the commercial markets. There are certain things that are needed, a clear and transparent governance process, an independent board, the ability to retain earnings, title to the assets, independent decision making. All these things are questionable when you take a look at what is being proposed for the restructuring of the National Oil Company. So, what does good look like? I've provided you some perspective. I've also given you some answers to your questions about why would the $100 million go away? We're very concerned that Nigeria would no longer be competitive globally. We're very concerned that the investments looking at it in isolation in Nigeria would no longer be something that industry could invest in.
The only way by which you can be fair is to look at the facts, the hard facts as they are. What are the facts? In the Sixth Assembly, by the time they brought PIB, it was towards the tail end. To do public hearing and do some other things, by the time they went into the real nitty-gritty of consideration of clauses by clauses, time caught up with them and they were not able to finish. You know, like many of my colleagues who are lawyers here know, that a parliament cannot bind its successor, and its mimic and foreign compensation commissioners. So the Seventh Assembly must start on a fresh note. Even at that, I recall, and Nigerians will recall, that as soon as we resumed for the Seventh Assembly, we tabled PIB before us. I remember that in the House of Reps. But words came to us from the executive that we should hold it, and we stopped. 2 weeks thereafter, the bill was moved away from us. And like my brother rightly mentioned, a technical committee was set up. And that technical committee took over on the bill to work on it. Even by that time, when that bill was pending before the technical committee and it had been withdrawn, there were press remarks and press statements that Parliament was delaying the passage of the bill. You can see how unfair that can be. Now, that technical committee sat for some 8-10 months, and then later brought the bill back. When they brought it back, within few months, when it was brought back, both chambers of the National Assembly ensured that the bill was introduced at plenary. And again, within few periods, we were able to take it for second reading, both at the House of Representatives and at the Senate. And that happened before we came here last year. And of course, I was indisposed last year, but because of my interest in this country, I managed to be here. And I remember and recall that we told you that we'll ensure we work on it. Between last year and now, we had those SONA congresses, SONA public hearings that I told you of. And we have also had the Abuja public hearing. Thereafter, we have now gotten into the technical session. We have to be fair to this parliament. Let us be positively patriotic and believe that they will pass this bill.
We are as concerned, we in National Assembly, we are as concerned as every other stakeholder in this subject matter. If you recommend, as you are saying this evening, that we just turn out or turn up this document as it is, I think we must all agree that we'll be shooting ourselves at the leg. It's like it will be a very temporary euphoria or what you think you have achieved, and in a very, very short while you will come back for the numerous amendment. And I think that the way we are doing it in this 7th assembly, which I believe as a core participant, that I believe that at the end of the day, our 7th Senate will end up sometime in May next year. I am of strong opinion that with the way we are going, we've gone first and second reading, with the both chambers have independently, but sometimes we review our activities, but independently we are at technical session working towards the 3rd reading. And a job that we are doing, what is worth doing is worth doing it well. I do not think it will be in the interest of both the Nigerians or the international oil companies in this country, and indeed the indigenous companies, that we are also hoping that this bill will open up more for them, will be happy to see that certain things that are contained there. In my years, this is my 11th year in the National Assembly. In my years as a legislator, I have not seen where a bill or a proposed document such as this comes in and goes out. We have to list it because we are the people's representatives. For instance, no, I mean, let's say for instance, we have had complaints or written documents from operators saying, how can we help you, help Nigerians to improve our gas infrastructure development at a recommended gas threshold of 80%, from 30% to 80%. Are you saying we should turn it out like that?